They thought he was untouchable. His wives, his children, even his followers thought he was in charge. But within that courtroom, when the judge called for explanations, Kody Brown was compelled to speak the truth, and the judge was unimpressed. The courtroom was filled to bursting. Each bench groaned beneath the mass of expectant bodies. Each murmur carried the charge of excitement. This wasn't another hearing. This was the day that everyone had been waiting for. The downfall of Kody Brown, the man who had stood on reality television proud to be a patriarch, was about to be revealed before their very eyes. The air was charged with tension. Heavy as a pall, court reporters pushed glasses up noses and scrutinized recorders. Cameras snapped behind them, recording each twitch, each drop of sweat above Kody's brow. Ex-fans, ex-wives, and curious onlookers craned forward, their faces a cross between curiosity, rage, and barely suppressed satisfaction. And then, crack, the gavel came down. The voice was so crisp, it made everyone jump. The patter ceased, the murmurs died. The silence that remained wasn't vacant, it was alive, humming, electric with anticipation. The judge, a gruff woman with a sharp gaze and an aura of authority, leaned forward over her bench. She had no time for niceties. Her voice thundered, firm and unyielding, "Mr. Brown, this court insists on an answer. Where did the money go?" The words fell like the hammer blow, more heavy than the gavel itself. Every head turned to Kody Brown. There he sat at the defendant's table, a man who had once been so confident, so certain of his position in the world. His hair, once so neatly coiffed for television, now hung limp and uneven. His knuckles were white as he gripped the edge of the table. He attempted to maintain his face, but his eyes gave him away. They flashed uneasily from the judge to the documents in front of him, then to his attorney, frantically seeking comfort. But there was no comfort to be had. Not here, not today. The room was quiet, but the quiet was deafening. Everyone in attendance was having the same thought. This was the question Kody could no longer evade. He had evaded it on television interviews. He had danced around it with his wives. He had waved it off when the fans speculated about it. But in a courtroom, under oath, in the scrutiny of the law, there was no longer evading. His attorney moved closer, whispering something frantically into his ear. Kody nodded, swallowed, and attempted to regain his composure. He cleared his throat. His loud, booming voice cracked like shattered glass. "Your Honor," he started, stuttering slightly. "It's not what it seems." But before he could utter another sentence, the judge held up her hand. "Stop." Her voice was cold, with no space left for debate. "Do not make a mockery of this court with evasive answers. Do not delay. This is not a reality show, Mr. Brown. This is a court of law. You will answer directly." The air was heavy with tension. A woman in the public gallery gasped loudly. A reporter furiously took notes into his notebook, sensing history unfolding. Kody's lips parted, then snapped shut. He was a drowning man, flailing for breath that just wasn't there. He fussed with his tie, pulled at his collar, wiped the sweat from his brow. Each little gesture gave away his desperation. And then silence. Cold, choking silence. The judge inched forward, her piercing eyes focusing on him like a hunter sighting prey. "Where did the money go?" she asked again, her sentences slow and measured. The court leaned forward as a unit, breath suspended, anticipating an answer that never materialized. The room's energy changed. It was no longer expectation anymore. It was anger, frustration, a mass call for the truth. Kody's ex-wives were mixed among the audience members, each with their own raw feelings etched on their faces. Christine's eyes burned with a mix of fury and vindication, as if she had been waiting years for this moment. Janelle sat stiff, arms crossed, lips pressed tightly together. Mary's face was unreadable, but her eyes glistened with a sadness that no words could mask. Robin clutched a tissue, dabbing at her eyes, though whether the tears were for Kody or herself was anyone's guess. The public also was unyielding. They had witnessed the story for years. The promises of togetherness, the eroding trust, the rumors of money secrets. And now they were watching it all come together into one momentous instant. And still Kody remained silent. The judge's patience was as thin as a knife. She pounded her hand on the bench, the sound booming like thunder. Mr. Brown, this is your last warning. The court is not in the mood to play games. You either tell us where the money has gone, or we will go forward with repercussions that cannot be avoided. Kody's attorney stood up, trying to object, but the judge vetoed him right away. Sit down, counselor. Your client understands very well what I'm asking, and he will respond. This court is not going to be manipulated. The attorney slumped back in his chair, defeated. Kody's lips quivered. He shifted awkwardly, sweeping his hand over the sheaf of papers in front of him. Although he obviously wasn't reading, his gaze swept around the room again. But this time there was no sympathy, no support. There were only cold stares demanding justice. At last he took a trembling breath. His voice was low, uncertain, almost as if it might beg. Your Honor, I don't know if I can. The judge interrupted him again. You will, Mr. Brown, because if you don't, you leave this court no choice but to assume the worst. And believe me, assumptions can be far harsher than the truth. The pressure of those words bore down on him like a mountain. The audience could no longer hold itself back. Whispers broke out, grew louder with each second passing. Did you hear that? He doesn't know where the money went. Of course he does, just doesn't want to admit it. He's keeping something from us. He's always keeping something from us. The bailiff shouted order in the court, but it was in vain. The tension had become a living entity, spreading across the room like wildfire. Kody slumped further into his chair, each whisper another stab in his back. The walls were closing in, the air pressed down. His own breathing came short, ragged. He was a man cornered, and everyone knew it. The judge retreated into herself, her face stern but determined. She drummed her pen against the desk with slow deliberation, each click ominous. This court is providing you with a final opportunity, Mr. Brown. The truth will emerge, either through your mouth or through the evidence already piled up against you. I would advise you to make a wise decision. Kody's hands trembled as he clasped the folder more firmly. His lips parted, but nothing emerged. The silence stretched and the long minutes became interminable. And then his mouth opened, his voice shattering the silence. Your Honor, the money. It's not where you think it is. The room gasped. Reporters surged forward. Christine's eyes went wide. The judge sat up straight in her chair. But before he could get out the words, the gavel came crashing down. This session is adjourned until Mr. Brown gives the entire truth, the judge announced. Her voice brooked no argument. Kody had just lost his chance. The bailiff bellowed for order as the room erupted into pandemonium. The murmurs became cries. Cameras blazed wildly. The truth hung just out of sight, yet still concealed. And Kody? He slumped in his chair, white, perspiring, and shattered. A man aware his secrets were closing in, heartbeat by heartbeat. For years the Brown family was set up as a strange but compelling example of an alternate American family. Cameras trailed after them as they laughed and bickered, had children and struggled to manage the intricacies of a plural marriage. On television, Kody stood in front of the cameras as a man who was all about oneness, about creating a legacy greater than himself. But behind the edited-for-TV episodes and scripted smiles, fissures were beginning. By the time the truth unraveled in court, those cracks had expanded into great, irreparable chasms that everyone could not help but notice. And at the root of it all was money. Christine made the first move away from the devastation. Fans had witnessed the tension for years. The crying in private, the weariness of giving everything to a marriage that gave so little in return. She once remarked on camera, "I can't keep pretending everything is fine when it's not." Those remarks hit her supporters. But what people didn't completely appreciate at the time was that she wasn't just worried about romance or affection. She was worried about surviving, about money. When she went, she didn't simply leave Kody behind. She left behind a money mess. It felt like no matter how hard we worked, no matter how much money came in, it all just disappeared. She told friends. I would ask where the money was going, and always the answer was elusive, always vague. She wasn't the only one who noticed. Janelle was always the practical one, the planner. While others kept house, she kept numbers, logistics, and duty. She was aware of what the family made from TLC deals, book deals, and speeches. She was aware of the amounts being more than enough to live comfortably. But reality wasn't quite the math. Bills mounted, hoped for projects, such as the aspiration to construct several homes on the family's Coyote Pass property, dragged on indefinitely. Even when funds appeared to pour in, they vanished as fast. Janelle started raising tough questions. But whatever responses she received from Kody were always tainted with annoyance. He'd brush off his hand, divert the conversation, or blame her for not having faith in his leadership. "Trust me," he would say. "I know what I'm doing." But Janelle wasn't convinced. And as the years passed, her suspicion hardened into certainty. Something was very wrong. Mary, the first wife, had stood by Kody longer than most expected. Even after betrayals, humiliations, and years of being pushed to the side, she clung to the belief that their marriage meant something. She wanted to believe in the dream of family unity, but even her fidelity was not limitless. When she found that joint bank accounts mysteriously depleted, when promised project money never appeared, she felt like a fool. "I thought I was investing in our future," she confided once in a whisper. "But perhaps I was simply filling up an empty space that could never be filled." The bitterness clung to her, and although she wasn't the first to go, the day arrived when she could no longer stand up for Kody. Robin, the baby of the group, stuck with Kody. Some say love, some say it was desperation or denial. She wept when Christine departed. She wailed when Janelle turned her back on him, and she shook in her boots when Mary surrendered at last. For Robin, Kody was more than a husband. She was his protector, his stability, the father of her children. And still, even she couldn't help but notice the nagging question that irritated everyone else: where was the money? She had spoken out for him publicly, denying the rumors as exaggerated. But in private, even she began to notice flaws in the accounts he presented. As each of the wives walked off on her own, viewers of the show put the pieces together. The internet forums hummed with rumors. Some believed Kody was investing money in hidden assets. Others accused him of spending it on his own selfish living expenses, leaving the rest of the family to scrounge. One such tip that flew like a wildfire said that he had transferred money into accounts in other names in order to protect them from legal scrutiny. Another tipped that he was investing in failing real estate ventures, following a dream of being a land baron that never materialized. However the truth may have been, one thing was certain: the family had made millions while they were on the air. But when the dust cleared, the wives were left scrambling to get by. Christine had to begin anew from scratch. Janelle confessed she didn't have the money she anticipated. Mary clung to her modest business as a lifeline. The wealth that had once appeared boundless had disappeared. What made it harder wasn't only the money, it was the betrayal. Christine felt manipulated, her sacrifices tossed aside. Janelle felt tricked, her careful consideration disregarded. Mary felt embarrassed, realizing she'd been betrayed out of her own loyalty. Even Robin, while still standing by Kody, felt the burn of broken promises. The children also weren't spared. They saw their mothers struggle, their homes destroyed, their futures shrouded in doubt. The big happy family was now a field of resentment and mistrust. One of the older children was heard to say, "We grew up on TV, but we were living a lie. People thought we were rich. They didn't see the fights over money, the stress, the constant fear that there wouldn't be enough." By the time Kody was sitting in that courtroom, his father and husband reputation was already in tatters. The courtroom was not about issues of law. It was about the culmination of years of mistrust, betrayal, and unanswered questions. Christine was there, arms folded tightly across her chest, eyes locked on him with an intensity that could burn. Janelle sat quietly, but her silence was louder than words. It was the silence of someone who had known all along. Mary's eyes were heavy with sadness, but even she no longer had sympathy left to give. Robin dabbed at her eyes, her last threads of hope unraveling. They weren't observing a trial. They were observing the ultimate verdict of the man who had promised them the world and delivered nothing. Christine's voice continued to ring in the ears of many. It's like pouring water into a bucket with holes. No matter how much we worked, the money just disappeared. That one simple sentence summed up the tragedy of it all. They had invested their time, their love, their labor, their faith in Kody's dream, and it all bled away into darkness, leaving them with nothing. The bucket with holes was now the quintessential symbol for the Brown family's demise. And now in court, the world wanted to know what had made those holes, and who was to blame. The media lapped up the story. Headlines shouted betrayal. Talk shows speculated on missing money. Social media went crazy with memes, conspiracy theories and outrage. But to the wives, to the children, to the individuals who had once seen the potential in Kody's vision, it was not entertainment. It was heartbreak. It was years of sacrifice down the drain. It was trust broken. And that's what had made the courtroom so combustible. It wasn't merely a matter of figures in an account book. It was about ruined families, shattered promises, and the man in the middle having to account for the decisions he'd made. As session 2 comes to a close, the viewer realizes the full extent of what Kody is dealing with. He's not just reporting to a judge. He's reporting to his family, his public, and the world. The wives' tales had established the background. The speculation had created the drama. And now the reality was going to be yanked into the open, whether Kody liked it or not. The man who had once stood in front of cameras boasting about his family was now cornered, deprived of illusion. The family was broken, the cash was lost, and all that remained was the truth. And the courtroom wasn't going to let him get away from it. The air within the courtroom was oppressive, nearly heavy enough to smother. You heard the distant hum of fluorescent lights overhead, the scratch of pens on paper, the slight movement of bodies on hard wooden seats. But past those small noises, there was nothing. A silence so pure it seemed like a stifled breath. And in the middle of it all sat Kody Brown. His eyes nervously scanned the room. His hands gripped the folder before him, papers shaking in his hands. His lips were tight, his jaw firm, but his white skin belied the terror churning within. The judge, her robe carefully folded over the bench, glared down at him with piercing intensity. She had waited patiently through hundreds of hearings. But now she was impatient no more. She leaned forward, her voice cutting through the silence like a blade. "Mr. Brown, this is your last opportunity. Where was the money spent?" The words weren't a query. They were an order. A judgment, a hammer falling. A murmur went through the room, then fizzled out as quickly under the judge's stern look. Everyone was aware of what was going on. This was not about lost figures on a spreadsheet. This was about betrayal, corruption, and years of deceit finally being brought to light. Christine shifted in her seat, jaw tight, arms folded so tightly it appeared painful. Janelle's gaze remained fixed on Kody, hard, unyielding. Mary, face expressionless, appeared to be conflicted between anger and grief. And Robin held a tissue in the shaking hand, blotting her eyes, praying under her breath. They weren't sitting in on a trial. They were sitting in on their lives, broken and laid bare, being acted out for the world. Kody's attorney, a neat man in a navy blue suit, stood up abruptly. His words were firm, practiced, and loud enough to be heard throughout the court. "Your Honor, respectfully, my client has the right to bird." The judge banged her hand on the bench, before he could get out another word. "Sit down, counselor," she snapped, her words ringing off the walls. "Your client has had rights. He's had time. He's had chances. What he hasn't had are answers. And this court is going to have them today." The attorney stiffened, then glumly slumped back into his chair. The point was made. No more interruptions. No more stalling. Kody was alone. Kody's breathing accelerated. His chest expanded and contracted in brief, jagged gasps. Sweat beaded on his brow. He yanked at his tie as if it were choking him, then released it completely. His lips moved silently for a second, as if practicing words that would not be spoken. For so long, he had been the master of his universe. Master of the story. Master of the funds. master of the family's destiny. But here in the glare of the fluorescent lights, and the unflinching eye of the judge, all his mastery was ebbing away from him like grains of sand. The audience witnessed it. The collapse of an individual who used to exude self-assurance, but now resembled a trapped animal. The judge didn't bat an eye. Her gaze remained fixed on Kody like a hawk hovering over prey. Her voice became sterner, every word puncturing like a knife. Millions passed through your hands, Mr. Brown. Contracts, appearances, book deals. Your wives earned. Your family made sacrifices. But when they departed, there was nothing remaining for them. Not one dime. Where did the money go? Her words resounded in the courtroom, dense and unmovable. Kody's lips were shaking. He opened the folder on his desk, flipping rapidly through pages he obviously wasn't skimming. The papers in his hands shook so hard that one slipped and fluttered to the floor. He stooped to pick it up. But even that was an awkward motion, a striving. Finally, after what seemed like forever, Kody spoke. His voice was low, trembling, each word pulled out like it cost him something to utter. Some of it, he said, looking down at the paper on his desk, went into investments. There was a stir in the courtroom. The word hung there like smoke. The judge's eyes narrowed. Investments? Be specific. Kody swallowed hard. His Adam's apple rose and fell, as if he were attempting to swallow the truth itself whole. Some into land, he whispered. Some into businesses. And some. His voice broke. He licked his lips nervously, then continued. Some into accounts. The judge leaned forward. What type of accounts? Kody froze. His hands gripped the folder tighter, his knuckles white, his eyes flickered to his lawyer, who gave the slightest shake of his head, warning him to be careful. But it was too late. The judge pressed harder. Were these accounts in your name? The judge demanded. Kody's silence was oppressive. He shifted uncomfortably in his seat, his eyes scanning the crowd, the cameras, his wives, each face a mask of judgment, disbelief, and betrayal. Then, at last the words tumbled out, faltering but incriminating. Not always. Gasps broke out around the room. The scratch of pens on paper was a staccato background as the reporters wrote madly. The wives sat rigid in their seats. Christine's eyes went wide with vindication and horror. Janelle muttered something under her breath, shaking her head. Mary clamped her hand over her mouth, and Robin erupted into sobs. The judge banged her gavel. Order? But the room would not remain quiet. The import was too large. Kody had just confessed to channeling money into accounts in someone other than his own name. When finally, the courtroom did subside, the judge rephrased, her voice shaking with suppressed rage. Mr. Brown, are you confessing to intentionally concealing funds? Kody was silent. His silence was deafening over any admission. The judge's face set in a stern expression. This is fraud. Pure and simple. Do you have any idea of the seriousness of what you've just admitted? Kody's lips worked, but no words emerged. His attorney leaned over, whispering frantically, but the judge slammed his hand down on the desk before he could protest. Counselor, if your client declines to answer, this court will interpret his silence as affirmation. The words fell like lightning. The audience shifted, gasps built into a storm. Cameras flashed, reporters leaned forward. The wives sat in stunned incredulity. Kody's kingdom of secrets was crumbling before their very eyes. The crowd could hold no more. He kept it a secret. A cry went up from the back. He lied all those years. Another voice cried out. He stole from his own family. The bailiff yelled, "Order in the court," but the damage was done. The room was pandemonium. Christine rose, her voice trembling but clear. I knew it. I knew he was hiding money from us. The judge pounded the gavel over and over, her voice a low rumble. Sit down. Order, or I will have the courtroom cleared. Gradually, the pandemonium receded, but the tension remained like a storm cloud waiting to burst again. When the room finally subsided, the voice of the judge fell low, as cutting as a knife. Mr. Brown, this court has had enough of your obfuscations. Time for games is over. If you believe you can hide behind silence, you're wrong. The truth will out, either by your own admission, or by the evidence we already have. Decide wisely. Kody's shoulders sagged. His pale face stared back, eyes glassy. He was not the self-assured patriarch of yore, but a man gazing into his own destruction. And everybody saw it. The silence again dragged on, agonizing. Pen scratchers waited, lensmen focused, the wives' breath caught. At last Kody whispered, barely audible, "It wasn't supposed to be like this." The judge sat up, then explained to us what it was supposed to be. Kody's eyes were closed, his body shaking, and then just as he was about to spill it all, the gavel came down. "This session is adjourned," the judge announced. "Mr. Brown will be back tomorrow, willing to explain every aspect, or face repercussions far beyond his understanding." The courtroom exploded again, as the bailiff shouted for order. Wives hushed wildly among themselves. Reporters scrambled out to break the news. And Kody remained frozen, shattered and speechless. The world knew enough to understand one thing. The truth was larger, darker and nearer than anyone could have dreamed. The instant that Kody's words escaped, not always, the courtroom was transformed. Gasps rent the air like a ripple on rocks. Murmurs became shouts. Whispers became accusations. It was as if each one of those individuals crowded onto those benches had been waiting years to learn the truth that they suspected. And now, in 2 words, Kody had told them. The air was electric, with shock. Cameras popped like lightning. Reporters leapt to their feet, pens scrabbling across pads, phones produced to text out headlines that would flash around the globe in minutes. The bailiff shouted, "Order, order in the court," but his voice was lost in the madness. Christine stood first. Her voice shook, but anger propelled it across the room. "I knew it. I knew you were keeping money from us, Kody." Her words cut through the chaos, and all eyes were on her. She stood erect, shoulders squared, her blazing eyes a mixture of vindication and heartbreak. Years of betrayal overflowed in that one burst. Chanel stood up, shuddering, her lips quivering. "We believed in you," she breathed, the words ringing out loud enough to resound. "We labored, we sacrificed, and you deceived us. All of us." Mary sat still, but silently streamed tears down her cheeks. She didn't say a word, but her silence was louder than thunder. It was the quiet of one who had hoped for too long, fought for too long, only to have been made a fool in the worst possible way. And then Robin. She held a tissue so hard it tore in her fingers. Her wailing was inconsolable, her body shuddering as if her life had dissolved in a moment. "No, no, Kody," she wept. "Say it's not true. Please say it's not true." Kody had nothing to say. The crowd of onlookers, consisting of fans, reporters and curious bystanders, erupted in anger. He embezzled from them. One shouted, "Those years on television. What a scam." Someone else shouted, "He stole from his own family just to fill his pockets." The press gallery was a maelstrom of activity. Headlines were being written on the fly. Kody Brown concedes to secret accounts. Courtroom mayhem, as sister wives patriarch brought down. Allegations of fraud shake TLC star. The once charismatic patriarch figure was now a sideshow of shame. She struck her gavel repeatedly, her voice booming above the din of the crowd. "Order! I will have order in this courtroom." There was no order possible. Truth had blown up like a bomb, and its effects were beyond control. At last the bailiffs moved forward, their commanding presence silencing the crowd. The din receded, but there was still tension crackling through the air like electricity. The judge's face was granite, her gaze fixed on Kody. "Mr. Brown, you've just confessed to channeling money into accounts not in your name. Do you appreciate the seriousness of that admission?" Kody did not respond. His silence was condemning. "This is fraud," she said, her tone icy and unyielding. "This is utmost deception. You have betrayed your family, your people, and now you are accused of betraying the faith of this court." Her words were like hammer blows. Each sentence hit more forcefully than the previous one. "You are not a man of leadership," she went on. "You are a man of manipulation. A man who made a choice between greed and responsibility. And today the world is going to see you for what you are." The ensuing silence was thicker than any sound. Kody leapt up from his chair, his voice desperate, bordering on pleading. "No, you don't understand," he shouted, his voice breaking. "I was trying to protect the money. I was trying to save it for the family." The judge held up a hand. "Sit down, Mr. Brown. Do not try to justify your crimes as high-minded motives." But Kody continued, his words spilling out in a frantic, unconvincing rush. "I didn't steal it. I invested it. It was going to grow. It was going to—" "Enough," the judge bellowed, slapping down the gavel. The courtroom was silent again, but this time the silence was charged with something uglier. Shame. Christine's voice cut the silence. "Investments?" she sneered, her voice heavy with contempt. "You mean lies. You lied to us that we were broke while you were keeping money we worked for together. You stole from us our futures." Janelle interjected, her rage gushing voice shaking. "You kept us thinking we couldn't pay for food for some weeks. You kept us thinking the land was unaffordable. And the whole time you were stashing money under other names." Even Mary, long silent, finally broke her silence. Her tone was gentle but piercing, with every word being a dagger. "You didn't shatter our trust, Kody. You annihilated it." The judge looked at them, her expression softening for a brief moment. "Ladies, I do hear your rage, but you will have your justice in this courtroom." Robin slumped into the chair, weeping hysterically. "He's not a criminal," she protested, shaking her head. "He's not. He's my husband. He's the father of my kids. Please, please." But even as she pleaded, her eyes told the truth. She knew. Deep inside she always knew something was amiss, and now she could no longer hide from it. The judge's gaze went back to Kody, her tone icy cold. "You have exploited every individual who trusted you. Your wives, your children, this community. The proof of your guilt is far-reaching, and this court will not stand for such dishonesty." Kody slumped into his chair, his head in his hands. He didn't resemble the patriarch of a large family so much anymore. He seemed like a shattered man, defeated by the greed of his own making. At the rear of the room, reporters hurried to send breaking news reports. Within minutes, they flashed on the internet. "Judge denounces Kody Brown for fraud in dramatic courtroom moment." Chaos ensues as sister wives star accused of concealing funds. Ex-wives accuse Kody Brown of shocking trial revelation. The world outside the courtroom was already abuzz. Twitter was on fire. Hashtags trending. Fans and critics alike, picking apart every phrase, every emotion. Kody Brown was no longer just a man. He was a cautionary tale. The courtroom gradually returned to order, but it would never be the same again. Kody slumped in his chair, shoulders slumping, face white. His attorney spoke softly, urgently into his ear, but he didn't react. He appeared beaten, shattered, humiliated. He had spent decades creating an image. A man of faith, a man of family, a man of leadership. Now in public, the image was shattered irreparably. The wives no longer beheld a leader. The children no longer beheld a father figure to aspire to. The public no longer beheld a reality television star. They all beheld the truth. A man brought down by his own greed. The judge brought her gavel down one final time. "This court will reconvene to decide sentencing. But let me be very clear. This kind of fraud has very severe ramifications. Mr. Brown, your future dangles on a thread." The gavel fell, sharp and absolute. The audience burst again, shouting and whispering into a whirlwind of disorder. Christine rubbed away her tears, but kept her head held high. Janelle stood firm, unmoved. Mary didn't say a word, still her tears dripping down her cheeks. Robin clung to what remained of hope in her heart. And Kody? He sat transfixed, his eyes glazed and staring straight ahead, as if the gravity of his collapse had only just struck home. The court had truly been rocked to its foundations by the disclosures. But no one could have anticipated what followed. The judge's face was set like stone, her voice hard and unyielding, as she spoke the words that would consign Kody Brown to oblivion. "Bailiff, take Mr. Brown into custody. Effective immediately." The room gasped as a whole, a collective sharp intake of dismay that robbed the chamber of air. Christine breathed a stunned, "Finally." Janelle shut her eyes, tears streaming silently down her face. Mary clapped her hand over her lips, the quiet sob ringing their breaking hearts in the gallery. And Robin slumped back into her chair, her hands pressed against her chest, as if the words had physically hit her. The bailiff, a lanky man with an even gaze, moved forward without hesitation. His heavy boots clomped against the wooden floor with every step, the clang ringing out louder, more foreboding. He marched up to Kody's table, his hand resting near the cuffs pinned to his belt. "Kody Brown," he ordered sternly. "Stand up." Kody's body twitched as if hit by lightning. His eyes went wide with terror. Wait a second." His voice broke. This isn't necessary. I can explain." "Stand up." The bailiff's voice was steel. The whole room leaned forward, air stuck in their throats. The moment they had been waiting for, the fall of the once mighty patriarch arrived. Kody shoved back from the table, his hands raised as if in defense of the inevitable. His voice grew louder, shaking with desperation. "Please, Your Honor, you don't understand. This was all a mistake. I wasn't stealing, I was protecting. I was doing what I had to do for my family." The judge's eyes narrowed, her voice cold. "Mr. Brown, your family sits behind you, and they are the very ones you betrayed. Do not betray this court with hollow excuses." The words cut through him like a knife. He glanced over towards his wives, but their faces were stone walls of agony, disappointment, and fury. The bailiff grabbed hold of Kody's arm. The metal jangle of the handcuffs being clipped away was like a gunshot. It ruffled the crowd. "No, please," Kody's voice broke, high with terror. He tugged his arm, attempting to be free, but the bailiff did not let him go. "Don't make it worse than it has to be," the bailiff threatened. The cold metal snapped shut around Kody's wrist. Click, the first cuff was secured. Gasps erupted in the courtroom. Flash bulbs flashed as cameras snapped the moment. The photo of Kody Brown, who had once been a symbol of control and authority, now shackled by the very same restraints he could never have pictured for himself. But Kody did not go quietly. He turned in his seat, shouting in a panic. "No, you can't do this. I'm not a criminal. I'm not." The bailiff stood him up, holding his arm hard. "You are arrested for financial misconduct," the bailiff recited, voice even, practiced. Kody attempted once more, his words spilling out in a jumble. "It was all for them, for the family. I never wanted to hurt anyone." Christine stood up, her voice cold and enraged. "Stop lying, Kody. You hurt us every one of those days that you kept that money." Her words stilled him for an instant. His face contorted, caught between anger and shame. Christine's eyes blazed with decades of betrayal now vindicated. She didn't even blink as Kody's eyes met hers, full of beseeching. She shook her head slowly, a bitter smile on her lips. "You always thought you were smarter than everyone else," she murmured. "Now look at you." Janelle wiped her tears, and stood also. "We gave you everything, Kody. Our trust, our work, our lives, and you took it all, and threw it away. This is on you." Mary whispered over lips that quivered. "I defended you for too long. I can't defend you anymore." "And Robin?" Robin's sobs intensified, her hands shaking. "Please, don't take him," she pleaded. "He's not a bad man. He's just lost." But no one heard. The verdict was handed down. The judge's gavel came up, her voice firm but serene. "Mr. Brown, you're charged with fraud and fiscal misconduct. The proof is conclusive. Your efforts at justification have been unsuccessful. Today your reckoning begins. This court stands in recess." Bang! The gavel came down, pronouncing his destiny. The bailiff clipped home the second cuff. Click! Both wrists were tied. Kody slumped, his shoulders giving way beneath the weight of the metal restraints. "Please," he whispered once more, his voice cracking. "Please." But mercy was not to be found. The bailiff pushed him forward, one step making echo through the hushed courtroom. Cameras popped furiously, taking the photo that would be on front pages for weeks. Kody Brown, head bowed low, wrists cuffed, being led out of the courtroom in ignominy. As he walked by his wives, Kody's eyes scanned their faces one last time. Christine spun away. Janelle's eyes were cold, unwavering. Mary shut her eyes, not even glancing his way. Robin wept into her hands, unable to watch. For Kody, the worst punishment of all wasn't the cuffs, wasn't the arrest, but the knowledge that he had lost them forever. Outside the courthouse, pandemonium was the order of the day. Reporters closed in, cameras rolling live, anchors panting as they broke the news. Reality TV personality, Kody Brown has just been arrested, one yelled into her mic. The sister wives patriarch is charged with fraud after a dramatic courtroom admission. Another informed, this is the fall of a man who once said he had it all. The world watched as Kody was pushed into the back of a waiting police vehicle, the door closing with finality. Inside, the wives sat in horrified silence. The onlookers whispered to each other, some of them shaking their heads, others nodding solemnly, as if justice had finally been served. Christine released a long shaking sigh. It's over, she whispered. It's finally over. Janelle put a reassuring hand on her arm. No, it's only just starting. Now the truth will finally emerge. Mary brushed away her tears, her voice strained with sorrow. He was meant to be our leader, our protector. Instead, he ruined everything. Robin stayed hunched over in her seat, rocking back and forth, muttering to herself, he's not a criminal, he's not, but even she did not believe it anymore. The courtroom doors clamped shut behind the bailiff and Kody, the sound resonating like a verdict. The man who had stood at the head of a vast family, touting love, loyalty, and togetherness, now found himself hauled away in handcuffs, a shattered man. The courtroom, which moments before had been bedlam, settled into a silence. The onlookers, the wives, the media, they all knew they had just seen something historic. And as the final ring of the gavel still rang in their heads, one thing remained, a haunting and inescapable truth. When you breach trust, when you prioritize greed over love, when you believe you can outwit justice, justice will always catch up with you.